Hello, thank you very much for coming, for having a dialogue with someone coming from science on the Nexus. My name is Holger Hoff, I'm with Stockholm Environment Institute. We've been involved in the Nexus for quite some time, and we're really interested to bring it into what we call implementation, which is not something science can do by itself. So certainly the business sector plays an important role. And I would like to ask from your general impression from this conference here, why would you engage with the Nexus in the first place? What's in there for you, for your business?
So PepsiCo, of course, is a food and beverage company. And we don't talk about the Nexus. If I walked up to someone in the hall at work and said, I'm working on the Nexus, they would say, what is that? It happens as a matter of fact. We do need to save water. We do need to save energy. We rely utterly on an agriculture supply chain. Every product that we make, with the exception of bottled water, has an agriculture component to it. So they are intertwined for us automatically.
That makes a lot of sense. So, following up a little bit on that point that you make, I also don't think one needs to use the term Nexus all the time, as long as one sticks a little bit to these principles that are quite useful and it seem to be quite agreeable. Is there other terminology coming from your side? If you talk to colleagues in the corridors, how would they approach these issues of making the interlinkages, and so what terminology would they rather use?
Perhaps the word synergy, although that has other connotations as well. But I think that you just make the point that it takes energy to move water around. It takes water to help produce energy at a power plant or so on. So that I think people don't necessarily think of it automatically, but if you say about 3 words and they say, oh yeah, of course, they're related. Those are all related to each other.
So you're emphasizing that if you go to your colleagues, if you go to business community in general, much like in other cases, the Nexus as a concept is something people can relate to and generally would also subscribe to some extent.
I believe so. We, of course, being a food and beverage company, the agriculture part is very obvious for us. It may be less obvious for people that work in businesses, telecommunications or something. There, I think it's a little bit, it's not a stretch exactly, but they would probably not get the food connection quite as quickly, but still, in order to have a healthy workforce, they need to be nourished. So ultimately, the connection there would be through people rather than through the direct supply chain.
That also makes a lot of sense. Thanks. That's understandable, and I think that's very, very helpful here. The other major question, and the only other major question I would like to pose, is really on the role of the private sector, and also vis-a-vis other sectors, government sector, NGOs, and eventually also science. So if you paint the Nexus landscape, if I may call it like that, where is the input, the needs, but also the potential to contribute from the business sector, first of all?
So we actually have very good and important partnerships along these lines. We work with the Columbia Water Center at Columbia University, part of the Earth Institute, Manu Lal, who is a great water scientist, who has also worked on things like water allocation and drip irrigation. So there's the food part that ends up reducing the amount of water you're pumping, so you're reducing energy. So we have partnerships again with Columbia Water Institute. We've worked with Punjab Agricultural University. 2 that I'm not thinking of offhand, but certainly we recognize that while we're good at things, there are other people who are experts on things that we are not. And so we're very happy to partner with organizations on, and again, they bring science. We also view our farmers as partners with us as well, because ultimately science can come up with the solution and business can support the science, but it has to be practical in order for the farmer to be able to use it. We don't want to have a solution that will last for a week or even 1 crop cycle. We want to have something that is usable repeatedly. So we view already as we are all playing together.
Taking you up on the connections you have to Columbia University or possibly also other research institutions, this here being really driven more by the scientific community, reaching out to potential users of the data. Could you explain to some extent, maybe not in greatest detail, what kind of information you would ask these scientists, water scientists or agricultural scientists or others, what kind of information is useful for you from your perspective, where you think the collaboration with a university or a research institute becomes helpful?
I mean, at every stage, I would say, I mean, the things that we are clearly interested in is how much water is required to grow potatoes and corn and, you know, the crops that we rely upon. When is it important for that, you know, what are the, and I am a chemical engineer, not an agronomist, so I'm, you know, not as intelligent about asking the questions as I could be, but I would say it's always how much, what kind, how often, when.
And you get the answers, or is it because ourselves, well, often within science we ask this question, how best to bridge. We don't want to be completely supply driven only, and obviously some of the outputs coming from science are not so easily digestible for practice because they come in very specific journals or specific language. Do you get the kind of answers you need? And I'm not referring to individuals, but just to the scientific community in general. Or what could be improved on that communication between science and your company, for example?
I mean, we have relationships already, again, with Columbia, with Cambridge, Punjab Agricultural. So I think once you have a relationship, it's easier.
Okay.
I think that if we need something or we're interested in something, we'd ask Manu the question, and if he didn't know, he would say, but you should talk to my colleague over at Institute X. Okay. There is a part of PepsiCo that is doing things like technology scouting in the R&D group, which I'm not part of, but certainly I think that they would be the ones who would be, I know that they are reading journals, they are looking at information.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also important, I think, to realize that big companies do not completely rely on outside science, but they have their internal
we do.
Intelligence and knowledge as well. That's, I think that's quite important, and that may also be something for science programs such as this one, to reach out to scientists and research in, or let's say outside of universities and outside of the big research institutes. That might also become quite fruitful at some stage, I imagine.
Yeah, potentially.
Good. I think that's very good. Thank
you
very much.
We have not collapsed from hunger.
Thanks very much for that interview, and I hope that helps also the audience.